During the Second World War, the concentration camp system saw a huge amount of atrocities. Guards from the SS inflicted horrific violence and brutality onto the prisoners of camps such as Bergen-Belsen, and after World War II, a number of evil guards such as Irma Grayson and Josef Kramer were sentenced to death for their crimes. Camp commandants such as Rudolf Höss were also executed for their involvement in the evils of the camps, but there was a feeling that the majority of people that worked inside of concentration camps were never brought to justice. There are still trials happening in Germany today, and there was one camp that saw a huge amount of evil. It's estimated that between 63,000 and 65,000 prisoners at Stutthof Concentration Camp and its subcamps died from the horrific treatment that they were subject to. But there was some huge public executions that took place, where a number of guards of Stutthof were executed on a large public gallows. But what happened at Stutthof? Join us today as we look at the justified executions of the guards of Stutthof. Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Stutthof was set up with many other camps that were created for the Nazis to carry out their liquidation of populations. It was established in Pomerania in northern Poland, and before the Second World War began, lists of people were drawn up to be arrested. The Nazis were trying to find areas for their new concentration camps in Poland, and initially Stutthof was a civilian internment camp, and then it was expanded on a huge scale. It became a labour education camp similar to Dachau in November 1941, and was overseen by the German security police, but then in January 1942 it became a regular concentration camp. The initial camp was surrounded by barbed wire and a fence, and it had 8 barracks for prisoners and an area for SS guards. The camp was then expanded and a new one was made alongside the original in 1943, and it was surrounded by a heavily electrified barbed wire fence, and this new area had 30 new barracks. In 1943 the camp had a crematorium gas chamber built, and this was done for the final solution, where thousands of people would be killed inside the gas chambers. To hurry up the killing process at Stutthof, the SS even brought in mobile gas wagons to speed up the killing, and 150 people were killed inside these at each time. The camp staff was made up of German SS guards and also Ukrainian auxiliaries after 1943, and there were around 300 female guards and Austerinnen guards who worked at Stutthof, and they oversaw the female prisoners. There were many notorious female guards such as Herta Bofer, Jenny-Wanda Barkmann and Elizabeth Becker who worked there, and following the war 34 female guards were identified and then were sentenced at war crimes trials for crimes against humanity. Women were conscripted in Gdansk and other surrounding cities in June 1944, as there was a severe shortage of women to oversee the camp's operation. A number of other Waffen-SS volunteers from Norway also worked as guards there. But the first 150 prisoners at Stutthof arrived on the 2nd of September 1939, following the invasion of Poland, and they had been immediately arrested. Over the next 2 weeks 6,000 people were imprisoned there, and almost all of the prisoners were Polish until 1942. Then a huge number of Jews were deported to Stutthof from ghettos and other camps such as Auschwitz to work. There were a huge number of inmates from many other different countries such as France, Holland, Finland, Denmark, Latvia and other European lands. Amongst 110,000 prisoners were Jews from all over Europe, along with members of the Polish resistance and Polish civilians deported from Warsaw during the uprising. Other prisoners were made up of Lithuanian and Latvian members of the intellectual sector, Latvian resistance fighters, mentally ill prisoners and Soviet POWs. But inside Stutthof the camp conditions were very harsh and terrible. Dozens of thousands of prisoners died from starvation and disease, and typhus swept throughout the camp on a number of times, particularly in winter 1942 and in 1944. The prisoners who the SS deemed were too sick to work or too weak to work were sent straight to the small gas chamber or the gas vans to be killed. The first executions occurred on the 11th of January and on the 22nd of March 1940, where on a makeshift firing range 89 Polish activists and members of the Polish government were shot by the guards. It was from June 1944, where prisoners were gassed with Zyklon B pesticide, and 4,000 prisoners including women and children were killed in the gas chamber at Stutthof. Also a number of doctors at the camp killed ill prisoners inside the infirmary with lethal injections of phenol to the heart which would kill instantly, and guards would instill their reigns of fear and terror by drowning prisoners in the mud at the camp and also beating them to death with their truncheons. They also shot a number, resulting in up to 65,000 people being killed at the camp. Prisoners were also forced to work very hard. Many worked inside of SS businesses, including armaments factories which were there, and prisoners were forced to make weapons and ammunition for the German war effort. Also, a number were forced to work in local brickyards and other workshops, and then a Focke-Wulf aircraft factory was created at the camp. As time went on, it also became a network of forced labour camps, and there were around 105 subcamps set up inside of the Stutthof complex. Many of the subcamps worked for specific companies and produced specific resources for the German war effort. There were two commandants at the camp, SS Sturmbannführer Max Pauli, who finished his time in office in August 1942, and SS Sturmbannführer Paul Werner Hopper, who ended his office in January 1945 when the camp was closed. This came on the 25th of January 1945, where the evacuation of prisoners at Stutthof began, and there were around 50,000 prisoners there at the time. 5,000 people were marched towards the Baltic coast, and in horrific scenes were walked to their executions. On the banks of the Baltic Sea stood SS firing squads with their machine guns, and the prisoners were forced to march into the sea before they were then shot dead by the Germans. The other prisoners were marched towards eastern Germany. When the Soviet advances cut off the Germans, they were forced back to Stutthof, and many more died in the winter conditions, and the SS guards brutalised the prisoners, killing thousands in the final days of the war. The last prisoners were removed by sea, as the camp was surrounded by the Soviets, and yet again hundreds were forced into the sea and shot dead. There were many other war crimes connected with Stutthof. There was a series of Stutthof Trials that aimed to punish those guards who worked there. During the first war crimes tribunal held at Gdansk from April the 25th, 1946 to May the 31st, 1946, Soviet and Polish court officials convicted 13 officials and overseers at Stutthof. 11 of them were sentenced to death, and others were imprisoned. Those who were executed include Johann Pauls, the commander of the guards, Jenny-Wanda Barkmann, a vicious female guard known as a beautiful spectre, Elizabeth Becker, another evil guard, and many other camp functionaries and guards. The executions of the first trials took place on a huge public hill known as the Biskupia Gorka in Gdansk. There, it was estimated that around 200,000 people flocked to see the public executions, and assembled were a huge number of large gallows structures that were used to hang the condemned. Each of the executed people were put onto a large truck, and they were joined by guards. They were then secured to the gallows using the noose, and this was placed around their neck. Then the truck drove away, and the executed men and women were left hanging and swinging from the rope as they slowly struggled for breath as it was choked out of them, and they were executed. The executions took place on a large gallows where everybody could see. Further war crimes trials took place to bring those people who worked at Stutthof to justice. The second Stutthof trial resulted in 10 more people being sentenced to death, 9 SS men and a capo. Each of those were found guilty of brutally beating prisoners and being very violent. A third Stutthof trial occurred in 1947, and with this 19 guards and members of staff had been found guilty, and after this they were all sentenced to varying times in prison, depending on how serious their crimes were. The same occurred at a fourth trial in 1947, with 26 further SS members of staff found guilty and imprisoned, with Willy Buff being sentenced to life imprisonment. Fifth and sixth trials also took place, and in 1953, SS Rottenführer Emil Strelau was executed for his war crimes. Still today, a number of former SS members of staff and guards at Stutthof are being tried. In 2017, the prosecution of 2 former guards occurred, and in November 2018, Johanna Rehbogen was tried for working at Stutthof between 1942 and 1944, but this trial collapsed due to the defendant's deteriorating health. In October 2019, Bruno Day was accused of being complicit in the killings of over 5,000 prisoners at Stutthof and was tried by a juvenile court as he was 17 at the time. He was convicted of being an accessory to murder on 5,232 counts and was convicted of 1 count of being an accessory of attempted murder. Following the Second World War, the war crimes trials of the guards at Stutthof continued, and there were more of these that occurred than at other camps. But these trials did not make up for the horror that occurred there, and specifically after with the mass executions of prisoners inside of the Baltic Sea. The camp was one of the worst camps of the Second World War, and was a brutal and tragic sight of execution, killing and violence. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.